Let's talk about our story. And I mean, our real story. It doesn't start with pyramids. It doesn't start with cities. No, our story begins millions of years ago on an epic journey that made us who we are today. This is humanity's first, and maybe its greatest, adventure. Take a look at this number, 99%. Just let that sink in for a second. What on earth could that mean? Well, it's not a grade or a statistic from some poll. It is, quite literally, the story of us. All of us. That's right. For 99% of the time we've been on this planet, we were Paleolithic people. We're not talking about one chapter in a history book here. This is the book. It's a story that kicks off with one of the most important moments ever. The first time one of our ancestors picked up a rock and shaped it into a tool. Now, to really get this story, you have to understand the world it happened in. You have to understand the stage. And let me tell you, it was not a quiet or a stable place. It was a planet of constant, dramatic, and sometimes violent change. Geologists call this whole stretch of time the Quaternary Period. And as you can see, our story, the entire Paleolithic journey, takes place almost entirely inside that first part, the Pleistocene. You probably know it by its more famous name, the Great Ice Age. But here's the thing. Calling it the Ice Age is, well, it's kind of misleading. It gives you this idea of one long, deep freeze. But the reality, the real force driving our story, the thing that pushed our ancestors to their limits, was relentless, unpredictable change. You see, this was a world in constant motion. Tiny, predictable wobbles in Earth's orbit, called Milankovitch cycles, caused these massive climate swings. Glaciers would crawl down from the poles, and then they'd retreat. Sea levels would plummet, uncovering brand new land, like the famous bridge that connected Asia to the Americas. For the early humans living through this, it was simple. You either adapted, you moved, or you disappeared. So who were the people navigating this wild, chaotic world? Who are the heroes of our story? Well, the answer is way more interesting than you probably think. So let's just bust a huge, common misconception right now. Come on, we've all seen that picture, right? The one with the hunched-over ape that slowly stands up taller and taller until it turns into a modern human walking off into the sunset. But is that really how it happened? Was our story really that neat and tidy? Oh, not even close. The truth is so much cooler. For almost all of human history, the Earth was kind of like a fantasy novel, full of different kinds of humans living at the same time. Our evolution wasn't a straight line. It was a big, messy, branching family tree. Now, this family has a scientific name, the genus Homo. That's the club we all belong to. To get in, you gotta walk on two legs, have hands that can make things, and sport a bigger brain. And what's so incredible is that we keep finding new fossils that push the origins of our family way, way further back in time than we ever thought possible. And get this for a twist. Making tools wasn't even something only our family did. We found tools that are 3.3 million years old. That's long before the first members of our own genus, like Homo Habilis, were even around. But Homo Habilis did something genius with their simple tools. They used them to smash open animal bones to get to the marrow inside. And that rich, fatty marrow, that was pure rocket fuel for their growing brains. Then, around 1.9 million years ago, a totally new kind of human steps onto the world stage, and they are an absolute game changer. I want you to meet Homo erectus, the pioneer, the trailblazer, the world traveler. And you can see right here why they were such a huge deal. Homo erectus was the first species that really started to look like us. Long legs built for covering serious ground. They were the first to say goodbye to the trees for good, and, crucially, they were the first human species to walk out of Africa and start exploring the rest of the planet. They made better tools, and they almost certainly learned how to control fire. This was a massive leap forward. So as these different groups spread out, they adapted. They evolved into this incredible, diverse family of humans. Over in Europe, you had the famous Neanderthals, these tough, powerful survivors of the Ice Age. Out in Asia, you had the super mysterious Denisovans, who we know more about from DNA than from actual bones. And down in South Africa, you had the truly puzzling Homo naledi, who were challenging everything we thought we knew about big brains and complex behavior. And it turns out evolution can get pretty creative. On isolated islands, a weird thing can happen called island dwarfism. And it created amazing species like Homo floresiensis over in Indonesia, better known as the Hobbit for pretty obvious reasons. A totally different type of human, perfectly designed for their own little world. So let's just take a second to appreciate the whole cast of characters here. Look at the different players on our family tree, the massive time spans we're talking about, and just how widespread they were. It's wild. For millions of years, we were not alone. We were just one of many different kinds of humans, each with our own special skills. Okay, so we've got our stage, this crazy, changing planet. And we've got our cast, this big, diverse human family. So now, let's put it all into motion and look at the key moments of this incredible 2.6 million year journey. Seriously, the time scale here is just mind-bending. From the very first stone tools, all the way up to the arrival of our own species, Homo sapiens, just 300,000 years ago, each one of these milestones was a monumental achievement. These weren't just baby steps. These were gigantic leaps of survival, of innovation, and of pure grit. So why are we talking about this? Why should you care about some old bones and stone tools? Because this isn't just ancient history. This is our origin story. This is the story of how we became, well, us. You see, the Paleolithic wasn't just the Stone Age. It was the furnace that forged humanity. It's where we learned how to adapt to anything the world threw at us. It's where we got our relentless drive to see what's over the next hill. It's where our bodies and our brains evolved into what they are today. Our resilience, our ingenuity, it was all born on this journey. We're talking 2.5 million years to explore the oldest story there is, the story of human technology. But look, this isn't about dusty artifacts in a museum. This is the story of how our own minds were forged, one brilliant idea at a time. This is literally the story of us. So let me kick things off with a question for you. What do you think was the single most important invention in all of human history? I mean, the one thing that really changed everything. Just take a second. Got something in your head?
Okay, so if you were thinking of the wheel or writing or maybe even agriculture, you'd be off by a couple of million years. Nope. The most revolutionary app ever created, the one that kickstarted our entire journey as a species, was just this, taking one rock and hitting it against another to make a sharp edge. It sounds so simple, but that little act lit the fuse for everything that came after.
And that's where our story really begins. We're entering our first chapter, the Lower Paleolithic. Our story starts over 2.6 million years ago, in an era that was, by far, the longest in all of human history. This is where a simple piece of nature first became a source of incredible power in our ancestors' hands. So, say hello to the Oldowan chopper. This is humanity's first big technological tradition. And, on the surface, the process looks almost comically simple, right? Pick up a rock, hit it with another rock, get a sharp edge. For the longest time, scientists thought this meant our ancestors weren't very bright. But oh man, they were missing the genius hiding in plain sight. Because modern studies have shown us something absolutely incredible. Making even this basic tool was a deliberate, highly skilled process. You had to know exactly which rock to pick. You needed amazing hand-eye coordination, and you had to instinctively understand the physics of how that rock would break. This wasn't an accident. This was engineering, version 1.0. For about 1 million years, that chopper was the peak of technology. But then, around 1.76 million years ago, a new player walks onto the stage, Homo erectus. And with them came a major hardware upgrade, a new idea that would change the game completely.
And this is it, the Acheulean hand axe. Just look at it for a second. What's the first thing that jumps out at you? Unlike that rough chopper, this thing has a clear design. It's symmetrical, it's carefully shaped on both sides, and get this single tool design would last for an unbelievable 1.5 million years.
And here's why that's a huge deal. You can't just randomly whack a rock and get this perfect, symmetrical teardrop shape. You need a mental template, an idea. For the very first time, our ancestors were picturing a finished product in their minds and then forcing the raw material to match that vision. This right here is the birth of abstract thought. It's the birth of true design. So, as our minds are getting more complex, our ancestors were about to get their hands on one of the most powerful forces in nature. The next great leap wasn't about shaping stone. It was about harnessing the power of a star right here on Earth. I am talking, of course, about fire. I mean, think about what a game changer this was. Controlling fire was the ultimate upgrade package. All of a sudden, you have warmth to survive the cold and move into new parts of the world. You have a weapon to keep lions and tigers away. You have light to own the night. And you have a fireplace, a hearth, for everyone to gather around and become a real community. But the biggest change of all, that happened inside our own bodies.
This brings us to something called the cooking hypothesis, and it is just mind-blowing. See, raw food is hard to digest. It takes a ton of energy. Cooking basically does a lot of that work for you before you even take a bite. It makes nutrients way more available, so with our guts not having to work as hard, all that extra freed up energy could be sent to the most power-hungry organ we have, the brain. Fire didn't just warm our hands, it literally fueled the growth of our minds.
And we can actually play detective and trace the story of fire through the archaeological record. Now, there's some debated evidence from Africa way back 1.5 million years ago, but our first solid, undeniable proof of controlled fire comes from a site in Israel about 790,000 years ago. Fast forward to 400,000 years ago, and we start finding clearly defined hearths. Fire had become the very heart of the home.
Okay, let's jump forward in time. We're now in the Middle Paleolithic, starting about 300,000 years ago. This is the age of our most famous and probably most misunderstood relatives, the Neanderthals. For so long, we pictured them as these brutish, knuckle-dragging cavemen, but the real story is so much more amazing.
So let's just compare their tech for a second. Remember that Acheulean hand axe? That required a mental blueprint for one tool. But the signature Neanderthal innovation, something called the level loss technique, was on a whole other level. It was a complex, multi-step process. You'd carefully prepare a core stone, picturing not just one tool, but a whole set of different, specialized flakes you could then strike off. It's not a blueprint. It's a mental roadmap for an entire production line. And that whole idea of them being just big, dumb carnivores, yeah, we can throw that right out the window. Analyzing the plaque on their teeth shows they ate all sorts of things, mushrooms, pine nuts, even moss. But get this, some of them consumed poplar bark, which contains salicylic acid, that's the active ingredient in aspirin. They weren't just eating, they were likely self-medicating. They knew their world intimately. Okay, I want you to remember this number. 176,000. Because 176,000 years ago, Neanderthals did something so profound, so strange, it completely rewrites our understanding of who they were. Picture this. You're deep inside a cave in France. I mean, deep. Over 300 meters from the entrance, in a place where sunlight has never, ever reached. A group of Neanderthals went into that total pitch-black darkness, and they built something. What did they build? They snapped off over 400 stalagmites from the cave floor and arranged them into these large, mysterious circular structures. They used fire to light their way in the crushing dark. There's no practical purpose for this. It's not a shelter. It's not a hunting blind. This is undeniable proof of complex, planned, symbolic behavior. This wasn't about survival anymore. This was about meaning. And that brings us to the final chapter of our Stone Age saga, the Upper Paleolithic. Starting around 50,000 years ago, something just shifts into high gear. Technology, art, society, it all just accelerates in what some people call the cognitive revolution. This is when we, Homo sapiens, truly arrive on the scene. And just look at the pace of change now. We're not talking about one tool tradition that lasts for 1,000,000 years. Now we see this rapid-fire succession of different cultures, each with its own signature technology and art. You go from the first bone tools and carvings of the RNSCN to these stunning Solutrean points that look more like art than weapons, all the way to the breathtaking cave paintings of the Magdalenian. It's a full-blown creative explosion. And the technology didn't just get prettier, it fundamentally changed what the human body could do. One of the best examples is the atlatl, or spear thrower. Now, this might just look like a stick, but the idea is pure genius. It's one of the first times we see humans outsourcing their own biological limits. It's like saying, my arm is good, but I can make it better. It's basically a lever that turns your arm into a high-powered weapon. And what did that little upgrade get you? The power to launch a spear at nearly 100 kilometers per hour. That is insane. This wasn't just a game changer, it redefined what it meant to be a human predator. You could now take down massive prey like mammoths from a much safer distance. The rules of survival were completely rewritten. And the toolkit of modernity just kept growing. The invention of the eyed needle,
a tiny, simple thing, was revolutionary. It allowed for tailored, layered clothing, which was absolutely crucial for surviving the Ice Age. And they weren't just surviving in caves. In places like modern-day Ukraine, they built huge, semi-permanent houses out of the bones of hundreds of mammoths. That shows incredible planning, social cooperation, and the very dawn of architecture.
So you go from a simple sharp rock all the way to complex societies, art, and architecture. All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're unpacking one of the wildest stories ever told, and it's a story that's written right inside our own bodies, in our DNA. It's a tale of incredible journeys, ancient encounters, and the pretty shocking truth about who our ancestors really were. So let's just kick things off with a huge question. You probably think you're 100% Homo sapiens, right? I mean, it makes sense. But modern genetics, well, it's thrown a massive curveball into the story of humanity. So are we purely Homo sapiens? The answer might actually surprise you. Well, check this out. This is this stunning conclusion that scientists came to after they decoded the Neanderthal genome back in 2010. And no, this isn't some kind of metaphor. It's a literal, biological fact hiding in plain sight inside our own cells. Okay, so just how much Neanderthal are we talking about? Well, if your family tree has roots anywhere outside of sub-Saharan Africa, then somewhere between 1 and 4% of your DNA comes directly from Neanderthals. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but believe me, its impact is absolutely huge. So this genetic echo, this ghost from our deep, deep past, it's a fundamental part of what makes us who we are today. And it's all the result of a process that scientists call admixture. And to get how this all happened, you gotta know this one key term, admixture. It sounds complicated, but it's really not. It's just what happens when two groups that have been separated for a really long time finally meet up and, well, have kids. In our story, those two groups were our Homo sapiens ancestors and their ancient cousins, the Neanderthals.
And the crazy part is scientists have actually been able to pinpoint pretty much exactly when and where this giant family reunion happened. The genetic evidence points to a major event around 47,000 years ago, most likely somewhere in the Middle East. This was right as our ancestors were making their big move out of Africa and into a world that, was already home to other kinds of humans.
But wait, how did this meeting even happen in the first place? To get that, we need to zoom way out and look at the epic migration that set the stage for this whole thing. You see, our ancestors actually tried to leave Africa way, way back, around 120,000 years ago. But that first wave, it didn't make it. The climate was probably just too harsh. But then, around 60,000 years ago, a second major wave pushed out, and this time, it was successful. It's this group, the ancestors of every single person living outside Africa today, that spread across the entire globe and eventually met their ancient cousins. But, and this is where it gets even cooler, the story doesn't stop with Neanderthals. Nope. Turns out, they weren't the only ancient relatives we ran into on our big trip. There was another group, an even more mysterious one. Yeah, meet the Denisovans. These guys are like the ghosts of the human family tree. We know so little about them from fossils. I mean, archaeologists have only found a pinky bone, a few teeth, and a jaw fragment in a single cave in Siberia. But their genetic legacy, it's incredibly powerful, and it tells us a story of a completely distinct group of ancient people. So while most people outside of Africa have that 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, which is already wild, there are some populations today that have an even bigger chunk of DNA from the Denisovans. They represent a totally different branch of our ancient family tree. So who are we talking about? Specifically, it's people in Melanesia, we're talking Papua New Guinea and the islands around there, who carry the most Denisovan DNA, up to 6%. And get this, some Negrito groups in the Philippines have the highest concentration found anywhere in the world. It just goes to show that our ancestors' journey through Asia was every bit as eventful as their time in the Middle East. Okay, so this is all fascinating, right? We've got this ancient DNA swirling around inside us, but so what? Why does it actually matter today? What does this prehistoric legacy really do for us? And this is maybe the most important takeaway of all. This isn't just some historical curiosity or a fun fact. These aren't silent, useless junk genes. They are active. They're doing things in our bodies right now, shaping our health, our abilities, and even our weaknesses in this modern world. Okay, get this. There's a gene called EPAS1. You can think of it as a kind of superpower gene.
It's what allows Tibetans to live and thrive in the super thin air of the high Himalayas without getting altitude sickness. And guess where they got it? You guessed it. It was a gift from the Denisovans. That ancient interbreeding gave their ancestors a literal life-saving advantage. And the Neanderthals? Oh, they gave us gifts too. Imagine our ancestors moving into these totally new lands with all sorts of new germs and diseases they'd never encountered. They needed a boost. Well, some of the genes we inherited from Neanderthals helped supercharge our immune systems, giving us a much-needed defense against local pathogens. This kind of gives you a quick snapshot of the two different groups that met on that ancient road. You had the Neanderthals. They were strong, stocky, built for the cold, living in smaller groups with these sturdy, all-purpose stone tools. And then you had our ancestors, leaner, built for long-distance running, with more specialized blade technology, complex hunting tools like the spear thrower, and forming these huge social networks. They were different, for sure, but they were similar enough that their stories and their genes could merge into one. Okay, so let's zoom out one last time. All this genetic mixing, it's really just one incredible chapter in a much, much bigger story. We're talking about the 2 million-year story of how we became human. You can really boil our entire journey down to these 4 massive shifts. First, our technology. It didn't just get a little better, it exploded. From a simple sharpened rock to precision tools that could build shelters, create art, you name it. Second, our culture deepened. All centered around the hearth, around a controlled fire, which gave us warmth, safety, and a place to share stories. Third, our minds. They completely transformed, opening the door for complex language, symbolic thought, and the kind of cooperation that let us hunt mammoths. And finally, that fourth pillar, our genetics. We didn't just evolve in a straight line. We met and we mixed with other kinds of humans, weaving their strengths right into our own story. And really, that's the core of it all, isn't it? This isn't just a story about rocks and bones. It's the ultimate underdog story of how a species that was once just another primate on the savanna used its intelligence, its ability to cooperate, and yeah, its willingness to mix with others to become the force that would shape the entire planet. And that brings us right back to where we started, but with an even bigger question. We've found the ghosts of Neanderthals and Denisovans in our DNA, and scientists are already finding hints of other so-called ghost populations. So the real question is, who else is in there? What other ancient ancestors are just waiting to be discovered, hiding in the ghost in our genes?